said, you know what, I can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. And that's
Oh,
when and that's when I decided I would look into franchising.
Stacey Gibson. Hi. Welcome.
Hi,
Welcome to the She Became CEO podcast.
it's good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're so welcome. Stacey, I recently had a guest who candidly shared with me that she lost a lot of money because she bought into a franchise. And I know that you are an expert in buying franchises or actually coaching people how to consider or choose franchises.
Mhm.
And that's why I invited you, because even though the guest that I had also coaches people and advises people on how to start their businesses, including whether to buy a business, start their own business, or to buy franchise, I
Mhm.
felt that she was a little bit biased against franchising, probably because of her own negative experience, because she lost a lot of money buying into a franchise that probably wasn't right for her. So that is one of the main reasons why I invited you. So thank you so much for finding the time to talk with me and my audience.
Well, thank you for posing that question because that does come up from time to time that people do either hear of someone that has bought into a franchise and it was unsuccessful for them. And then you hear about people, a good 90% of people are still in business after 10 years. I've been in my franchise for 11. And so it is something that can be successful for many, many, many people. But just to kind of address your the lady who was on your podcast before, few things need to kind of come into play. And one of the things that I always tell people when they enter into an exploration with me, Ilse, is this is just an exploration. There is no end game except for you to come to a point of clarity as to whether franchising is correct or right for you. And that's really all I try to do, is to bring people to a point of clarity by using some tools and some other things. And some of the things we talk about are, what is your ideal environment? What are your goals? What types of things do you like doing in a career or in your role as a professional, whatever that might have been in the past? So these are the things we kind of take to make build a picture, if you will, of what could be a good fit for them. Now, does that mean that's always the case? No, not always the case, but that's certainly how I and everybody that I work with at the Entrepreneur Source approaches it. Is let's try to find out, really peel back the onion on what someone is looking for, and then present that to them, and then really kind of help them fully explore that model to make sure it is something that's going to be a fit for them for all of those situations, or all of those entities, if you will, that we just talked about, which is goals, lifestyle, all of those things that we really want going into it.
You've been in this role as a coach who is helping people to decide whether or not to buy into a franchise for 11 years, but you began your career in slightly different fields, which was advertising and managing media. So let's explore, or if you will, share with us how you started your career. Maybe you remember some stories from those early years when you started your adult life, so to say, what exactly you did, what skills you acquired doing so, and what lessons you learned, what probably will lead the story into how you got to franchising.
Absolutely. It is kind of how I got led to that path, if you will. I started off right out of school going into media sales. And I was in that very, very briefly, where I was selling television time. Then I found out about an opportunity at an ad agency where I would be actually buying time as opposed to selling time. And I was able to learn a lot about how to read a Nielsen book, how to read an Arbitron book, all those things. And then I learned how to plan. So I was planning and buying. I was working for McDonald's local franchisees in the area, and got a lot of great experience learning how to do promotions and negotiate and those types of things. Then I went down to try my hand at selling TV again, and I became a national sales person for TV. That meant I worked with over 100 different TV stations across the nation selling TV time in the Carolinas. And that's how I got to learn even a little bit more about sales, media sales, on top of what I had started off on, which was media sales. Bounced around, and I was like, you know what? Did a few other things where I was the marketing person for pimento cheese manufacturer that was local, and said, you know what? I can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. And that's when I decided I would look into franchising. And I spent 30 days, Ilse, 30 days doing my best to find out, okay, what kind of franchise do I want to be in? Because there's 4,000 plus out there. And if I do so, can it be operated in a small place like Boone and Blowing Rock in the high country? Number two, and number three, if it can, is it sold out already? And sometimes they are already sold out. So I was kind of hitting wall after wall after wall, and I said, you know what? I need some help. And I decided that I would reach out to an entrepreneur source coach. His name was Dan Prendergast, still in the company, been there longer than me. And we got together, and he said, I'm going to coach you through this to see if we can find something that could be a fit.
Stacey, you described such a rich experience. Let's zoom in a little bit on your experience, because I know that when you are trying to pick what business to start, it is a serious decision. And it is a serious decision in that really you need to think whether to start your own business and maybe buy your own business, or buy into a franchise, just as I mentioned at the beginning. But if you do the latter, which you are an expert in, you probably take into account the person's experience and also contacts. So what do you think was that, what were those skills and the experience that made you suitable and successful for buying into the entrepreneur source?
It's a great question, Ilse. I feel like the big things that directed me towards the entrepreneur source were, number one, I was not afraid of being in sales, or not that I ever consider what I do as sales. It is very much the antithesis in sales, depending upon how you do it, right? Yes. I've always been more of a consultative type of salesperson, where I really tried to find out what it is the person was looking for and to try to serve that need. And I felt like the way that I had always approached sales was pretty much what the entrepreneur source does on a daily basis, which is to find out what is the need and how can I possibly serve it with a franchise that would make sense for that individual. But the interesting thing is, when you dig deep enough, you start kind of pulling back the peeling off of the onion, as I mentioned before, you can find something that's really a fit that doesn't, on the surface, doesn't look like it would be a fit.
Yeah.
And a good 80 to 90% of the people I work with end up in a business model they would have never considered on their own because of that. And it's just really kind of matching up. What do people like to do? Do they like to build teams? Do they want to be a solopreneur? Do they want to work Monday through Friday 8 to 5, or do they just want total flexibility? These are all things that we really take a dive into to see what it is someone would want. So really the industry doesn't matter. It's really, what do they like to do? What gets them excited in the morning? What motivates them?
Yeah, I love that. And I also, how you started this answer, I love how you mentioned sales, and then you almost like felt, I wouldn't, maybe the word ashamed is a too strong word, but really there is that connotation, I don't know, in our society, but I like there is a public speaker, Colin Boyd, who is teaching selling is serving, if we look at it that way, because we have had probably negative experiences, but we really have something. One of my previous also guests said, I have something to offer. I can help with something that I have. And how would they know that I have it if I were not telling them what I have? But yeah, also then that thought that you mentioned, that people don't even know what franchise that could be. I have been considering diversify, so to say, my income streams, and I have been considering what to do. And just for that reason, that I am aware that I don't know many businesses, maybe what they can offer, I would be interested in talking with someone like you. People often are also blocked when we talk with them using terms that we think that they know what those terms mean, but they actually don't. And then people feel kind of like ashamed of not knowing because they see that the person expects them to know what that is. So please explain to anybody who is behind the screen and maybe doesn't really understand what franchising is in layman's terms.
Absolutely, Ilse, and I'm so glad you brought that up because it is very, very true. I always ask anybody that I'm having an initial conversation with is, well, some people think good things about franchising and others not so much. And what do you think? And they typically will say, well, it's fast food. And certainly that is the most visible part of franchising because their business model depends upon a high impact retail location to be successful. So it is what we see on every street corner. But there's also business to consumer that's retail, non-food, business to consumer, not food, not retail. Some of those are home-based businesses, mobile service businesses, virtual businesses, and a fair amount, which people are always surprised to hear, where you're working business to business, helping other businesses be successful. And I like to say franchising is this nice middle ground between being a bootstrapping entrepreneur, where you have to vet everything from the ground up, and kind of being a little bit like an employee. And the reason why I say it's smack dab in between those two extremes is because you are working with a proven business model. It's been proven on someone else's money and time so that a person can get into it and start making money faster, also scale it faster. But it's a little bit like being an employee. Even though you are in business for yourself, you're building wealth and equity you could actually sell for yourself. You're never by yourself. You have a whole community of other franchisees doing the exact same thing you're doing in different locations. And you also have a whole corporation that's behind you. They are completely invested in your success. They don't make money unless you make money. And that's why they provide support, training, research and development, technology. Ultimately, all a franchise business does is one major thing, and that is to help mitigate that risk of becoming a business owner. And I think that metric, and I just mentioned this a minute ago, that really drives that home is if someone were to look at how many people are still around after 10 years as far as business owners are concerned, there's only about 20% of those bootstrapping entrepreneurs still around and operating, but it's close to 90% of franchise businesses that are still open after 10 years. So that's why we use it so heavily within our portfolio of 170 different business models across 40 industries.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to just ask the next question would be, what makes you passionate about franchising? And it sounds like it's that rate of success. Is that true?
That is definitely one of them. I love the fact that someone can get into a franchise business. They get all the training that they need. They don't need to know the industry, which opens up a whole host of opportunities for someone to have an encore career or just leave a career that they hate. Those are things that I think are just absolutely phenomenal. And to be able to just get in there, you don't have to build the business plan. You don't have to, you open the box, you listen to the training, you follow the business model. And if you do all of those things, then you can be part of that 90 percentile.
What is it exactly what you do and how you help your clients?
You mean, what does the journey look like?
Yeah, sure, if you call it that.
Okay. Well, the journey is basically this. First of all, I start off with a few coaching tools that I try to, or that I ask my clients to complete for me. The first one is called a U 2.0, and this is for all practical purposes someone's own personal SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Most people do SWOTs for companies and brands. Rarely are we asked as individuals to do one for ourselves, and yet pretty important to understand. What do I have working for me? What do I have working against me? And what goals can I put in place in order to address those things? With a franchise business, that's the other lovely thing. You have a lot more opportunity to pick and choose what you want out of that next step, as opposed to what the job market may be tossing out at you. So that's number one. Number two is called a DISC, Driving Forces Assessment. And this is a 35-question assessment. There's no wrong or right answer, and it produces a report 45 pages long, all about my client. And it'll tell me things like what motivates, stresses them, energizes them, what's their ideal environment, what are their driving forces. And that's a great way for me to get to know them quickly, but honestly, it's good for a little self-exploration too. And then the third and final coaching tool is just called Tell Us More About You. And this is a 5-page online worksheet, has a lot of yes and no questions, has the client tell me what their skill sets are. And then it's got those 40 industries I mentioned earlier, Ilse. We just have them check off anything that they're interested or curious about. So once we get all of that done, we get back together for about a 2-hour conversation. Sometimes it's only in 90 minutes. And the whole purpose of that call is for me just to really learn as much as I can about that individual. We'll go over all of those coaching tools. We'll ask a bunch of questions about their careers, do a little education on the different kinds of ownership in franchising. And if they have any questions on how they might fund a business, we'll do a little education on that. And then we make the decision to go to the next step, which is the business models meeting. And that's where I present the 3 businesses that, after I've gone into that portfolio and searched throughout the 170, I'll present the 3 businesses I feel like help best achieve what they are trying to achieve. And I'll do a little summary just to kind of just to share that with them, and also their vision statement. So I'll do a vision statement for them as well. And then we get off the phone, and I'll have each one of those folks reach out to them for introduction calls. And those are typically about a half hour to an hour long. So that's really the first part of the process, me learning as much as I can and finding those business models for them to explore. And then they start having those conversations. Now, after that, as far as what happens is, well, they have the opportunity to learn about the marketing, the operations, all of those things. They'll take them through a round of calls, if you will, that can go as fast or as slow as they want them to. They also have the opportunity to look at a franchise disclosure document. This is a lengthy legal document that's mandated by the government for every franchise organization to have. And it does have some very important information in it for them to validate the business for themselves. And they also have a chance to speak with as many current owners as they like, so they can see what their experience has been and if it aligns with what they're looking for. They get all the way to the end, then they'll be invited to a discovery day. And there they'll have a chance to meet that team that they could be working with. So that's really what the process is. Again, it can go as fast or slow as the individual wants it to. It just has to have a certain cadence so that they don't forget what they've learned in earlier calls.
How much do you charge for all this work?
Well, that's a great question. There's actually, believe it or not, no charge to the client whatsoever for my services. How it works is that I get paid a referral fee by the franchisor should someone decide to go into a business that I've presented to them.
As regards those people who are considering, not everybody can do it. You probably need to have qualify for buying a franchise. So what are those prerequisites, if you will?
Good question, Elsie. Really, most franchisors operate in terms of trying to qualify somebody on a couple of things. Usually, credit score is one, because if they don't have necessarily the funding, they can get funding, right? So you need to have at least a 700 credit score in order for there to be. Now, the franchisors won't eliminate you if you don't need to borrow money, right? So the other thing they look at is net worth. A lot of people think it's liquidity. Really, net worth is more the metric that most franchisors look at, because sometimes you can get the liquidity from the funding, if you will, but some do have some liquidity requirements as well. And those are going to be all over the board as far as depending upon how much money is required to get into a particular business model. We have investment levels that start as, and I'm defining investment level here as not just the initial franchise fees, Ilse, but any operating capital you would need to appoint a cash positive. So what a lot of folks refer to as that all in. So they start as low as $50,000, they go all the way up to over $1 million, but kind of where our sweet spot is about $100,000 to $250,000.
Let's look at somebody who is married and that individual's credit score is great, but the spouse's credit score is not. Do you take that into the consideration when you see if the person qualifies? And can you talk more about that?
Sure. If one of the two is willing to be that person that's going to be taking on that financial burden, absolutely, they can definitely utilize that person's credit score.
However, another question that I would say would derive from the question that I asked before is, what if somebody would not qualify for the business they want exactly? But they have, let's say, a friend, but they are not bound in marriage. Would you suggest 2 people to get together, maybe 3 people to get together and form a partnership?
That can happen. I have heard of that, especially for some of those higher level businesses, higher investment level businesses that we have within our portfolio, that there have been partners that have gotten together in order to finance it. But I do caution that if you have a partner or want to have a partner, that you vet each other very thoroughly on how the business is going to work, who's going to make what decisions, and do so prior to, and possibly even have it in writing. Actually, you probably really do need to have it in writing.
Maybe you remember some of the success stories, or just interesting stories, or stories that can teach a lesson from your experience and experience of your clients.
Well, let me tell you about one lady who had been in consulting for a long time. She went through the process and she was very engaged, learning about the different types of businesses that were out there. And at the same time, her husband had a business and she also wanted to do consulting. She had done some consulting by herself before, and since she'd done business consulting from a corporate perspective, she was like, well, I'm just going to hang out my own shingle and do that. And when she went through and looked at the franchise businesses, there were some that she was very, very interested in. And then she was like also looking at her husband's business, how potentially he could help out with her consulting business. And ultimately, what her point of clarity was, and I love this, even though it didn't affect me in terms of making a placement. She came to her point of clarity that she knew exactly what she needed to do, and that was to open up her own business, work with her husband as far as trying to help him with his business, and also getting some business from his into her consulting business. And I like that example because it's really one that shows it's not about necessarily placing in a franchise business, even though that is the only way I am paid. It is about bringing someone to their point of clarity and having them so clearly get to that to say, I know what I need to do now, Stacey, and thank you. I couldn't have gotten there without this exploration. Another one is actually one that was a few years ago that I just sort of mentioned a little bit already, and that was a gentleman who had been in law enforcement for many years and hated it, had some close calls as well to his life, and he and his partner were done. They were really, really just done with being in that world for him. And they ended up finding a business that he has absolutely took it hook, line, and sinker, been extremely successful, gone out, and his sales is very much service. What can I do to help you? If I can't do it, I'm going to refer someone else for you. And he is such a giving person anyway. And he was hugely successful, and he is now to the point where he has built his business and he can actually operate it semi-absently now and do some other things. I mentioned another one just a little while ago too, about when you asked me the question about success. I had a lady that I was working with in Florida. Well, this was during COVID. And she was living in Florida with her sister. She's not married. Neither one of them are married. And she's like, you know what? She was working for a financial institution, and that was in Texas. And her office was in Texas. And she was like, okay, I love living with my sister. We have a great time together. We're both not married. I really want to stay in Florida with my sister. But if they open the office again, guess who's going to have to go right back to Texas? She was. And she was like, there's no way I can do that, Stacey. There's absolutely no way. And I said, well, let's see if maybe this might be a route for you. And we went into and did the deep dive as I just described to you. And she found a business model that was really kind of a unique one. And she absolutely loved it, jumped into it. She had a couple of stumbles the first few weeks that she was doing it, and then all of a sudden the sun came out and she was off to the races. And that's the one where the CEO of the company called me specifically and said, I just want to thank you for bringing her to our business model. You have 170 business models to choose from, Stacey, and you brought us her. And here she is winning an award for top sales.
Wow.
And that just warmed my heart beyond belief.
So, okay, so this is then my next question is, are the businesses that you are selling, are they location based, or they can be also virtual and a person can travel around the country?
Yes. The short answer is yes to everything you just said. There are businesses that are territory based. There are businesses that are unit based, like maybe just the traffic around a specific unit. Those are more brick and mortar, if you will. And there are businesses like mine, which are virtual, and I can work with anybody across the United States. So there's no geographic barriers at all on that.
Can you caution people maybe about what qualities or what mindset they have to have or have to adopt to be successful or even to start?
I think the best thing that anyone can do is to be open-minded, curious, willing to follow a model. If you're talking about a franchise business, willing to follow that model is key, especially for the first year or two. Does that mean you can't have ideas that might enhance the business model as it exists? Absolutely. But until you learn the business model and what comes with that system, then it's really hard to adapt accordingly because you don't know what you're missing out on.
Stacey, if anybody who's listening to this conversation wanted to reach out and to learn more how you could help them, share with us how they can find you.
Sure. They can find me a couple of different ways. Of course, you can always go to my email address, which is sgibson@esourcecoach.com. And I can send you some more information, including my website. So, yeah.
I will put all that information in the show notes of this podcast. And also, I'm going to create some video, which will be a little bit shorter than our conversation, so that people can see what we were talking about. And if they are compelled, they could listen to the full podcast episode. So thank you so much, Stacey, for taking the time to talk with me and my audience.
Well, I so appreciate it, Ilse. It's been an absolute pleasure for great conversations and great questions, and do hope we get a chance to do it again sometime.
Thank you, Stacey. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Ilse. Appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.